So for those who weren't here last week, I'm going to repeat some stuff, and then I want this second class to focus on the specific nature of the prophets seen through the Jewish lens. And once we have a strong foundation for that, understanding the prophets through the Christian perspective, through gospel writers or other New Testament writers, it's going to make, I hope, a lot more sense. What was that? Uh-oh. So, as we talked about last week, were they fortune tellers or a moral compass? Or were they just utterly annoying people? Or did they just suffer from woe is me throughout their biblical journey? And it's a combination, I want to say, of everything. It's not necessarily fortune tellers to predict the future, but if you read the text as is, you're going to assume that they're telling a fortune. But it's really, if you continue to do X and X is bad, then Y will surely happen. And a lot of the times, that X was the way, especially northern kingdoms, treated the marginalized people, in society. I'm going to say something that's a little sacrilegious for the Reform movement. The biblical prophets were not the pioneers for social responsibility. And the reason why I say that is, yes, they were committed to the poor, the widow, the orphans, but the primary focus of prophets is to prevent the community from engaging in the number one sin. Oh, Dr. Solomon. Okay, I'm going to pick on Dr. Solomon. What is the number one sin in Judaism according to Adam Wright? Yeah. With Judaism. You don't remember?
Well, let's think. Not
No, those are big ones, but there's one particular.
No, I don't know what you're getting at.
Okay, no one remembers? Okay, I'm not doing a good job. Okay, so the number one issue that plagues ancient Near Eastern Israelites, then Hebrews. Thank you, Dr. Saul. Okay, okay. No, idolatry. Idolatry. Idolatry is worse than murder. So when people say that the prophets are the spark that taught us social responsibility, or another term I find disingenuous, social justice. Social justice is a modern construction really perfected by Professor Wright at Harvard University in the 60s and 70s. So I reject that utterly as a historian. But they're not, because yes, we take care of the poor, the widow, those who are falling short in life. But if you're worshiping Dagon, the fish god, they're not going to be down with that. So there's a particular way in which prophets want to shape a Hebrew/Jewishish society. Okay? Issues with that. I know it's a lot to digest, but Abraham Guyder, the father of Reformed Judaism, saw the prophets as the pioneers for a new type of Judaism. He wasn't wrong. He wasn't right. It's a combination of a lot of things. But again, the main concern is preventing avodah zarah, and we will get, which means idolatry. So there's a teaching in the Talmud. Ein mazel leYisrael. Ein is a negation, meaning there isn't. What do you guys think mazel means? Mazel, you heard like mazel tov? What do you think it means? Mazel tov. Congratulations. Okay, now think, there's another way we can translate it as good luck or congratulations. So what do you think mazel was for the rabbis about 1,800 years ago? There's no luck for Israel. What do you think? Okay. Watch, this is so much fun. Okay. Who was born in May, like in the middle of May? Anybody? Okay. Would you know your sign? Okay. Okay. No hocus pocus, meaning we're not engaging in the astrology. That's, so that was, because that is that is pooey papooey. You don't do that. So we're not reading the paper to get our signs right. I was born in May 18th. I had no control over that. So Judaism says we make our own path. If things were predestined, then what is the point of Torah? And that's why the prophet comes in as this reminder to get us back onto Torah. And so when you juxtapose that with New Testament thinkers, were they true believers? And I'm going to say 100%, yes. I'm talking about, let's say, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, and Paul. Were they true believers of biblical prophets? 100%. Were they exegetical geniuses? Do they have this incredible way of interpreting Scripture to convey a believing point for a community? Yes. So, when we leave, I want all of us to know the differences between how Judaism understands the prophets and how Christians understand the prophets. And also, I know we're going to talk about this one more time, but the power of language is crucial for understanding the mindset, bimiuchad, as we say in Hebrew, the mindset of New Testament writers. And I want us to be able to debate this. Maybe that's the wrong word. Just talk about it. And my intent is not to ever destroy anyone's faith. My intent is to spark enlightened conversations about biblical history that make us more of believers. I mean, that's the whole point of the Passover Seder. Okay. I'm going to go back to Matthew 7:14. And for those who weren't here last week, raise your hands. Okay. This is why we're going to recover it real quick. There was class Doug last week. He went to the Hungarian Symphony last night, and he's hung over. That was a good fun. Okay. Okay. Someone real quick, who has their King James or New Standard Life Bible with them? Anybody? Which one do you have? Okay, that's a good one. What do you have? All right, read Isaiah 7:14 for me. Read it loud, like your pastor, like you're on the bema. 7:14. Yep, loud.
Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child, and bear a son, and will call his name Emmanuel.
Okay, so if you see that, and you're in the first century, and you hear of a miraculous birth, you're going to say, aha, this is what Isaiah was talking about. Now read me yours, please.
Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman with child shall bear a son, shall name him Emmanuel.
Okay. This is the main starting point for understanding how New Testament writers understand the Hebrew text, because in Matthew 1:23, he says, look, in beginning there was the Word. That's Matthew, right? He's talking, that's John. He's giving the genealogy, okay? He's giving the genealogy to make sure he's in line in King David. Okay? But then, he's got two problems, Matthew. One, who is Jesus' father? God. Okay? Okay. Son. That's real important, okay? Who else is his father? Okay. And who's Joseph related to? Okay. So how does that work? Remember the show My Two Dads? It's totally normal. Like Julius Caesar adopted Octavius, his nephew-ish, who became Caesar. So it totally works for Matthew. Okay, so why is Matthew using your lovely version and not using your lovely version? Version, not virgin. I caught that. So the main reason why is that Jews during this period relied heavily on the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. And sometimes there are words that really don't have a direct translation for what they're talking about. So in Hebrew, a young woman is an Alma. Everyone say Alma. Well, Alma, good Sephardic pronunciation. Okay? Septuagint, you'll see the word Parthenos. Parthenos does not mean young woman, it means virgin. Now, can we talk about, well, maybe a virgin and young woman, they're otodavar, they're the same thing, and that the Greek wasn't really off? And I'm going to say maybe or maybe not, because here's why I'm going to assume maybe not. We talked about a ketubah, a marriage contract, and if it's a first marriage between a groom and a bride, you'll see in the ketubah language that she is a betula, a virgin. Yeah, if she wasn't and she wasn't married, it's not going to be a really good deal back then. Okay. So, traditionally, it means virgin. You are acquiring. So, let's go back in time, and this is me, and I have 2 daughters, and someone is acquiring both of them because it was a transaction, and I'm losing something in my household. It's the way they thought. And part of the stipulation is that my daughters are virgins, and that's what's going to happen. And that, in Orthodox communities today, that's how it works for first marriages. So what is Matthew doing? I firmly believe that Matthew is incredibly smart. And I firmly believe he knows the difference between Parthenos, Betula, and Alma. So if you're a new believer, you decide to engage in a translation, I don't want to call it a fib, but an advantageous translation to hopefully get more believers. Is everyone following on me? Impactful, okay? Or is he completely wrong? Matthew's not wrong. But I think Matthew made a mistake at first. Because Matthew's goal, if you guys remember my parabolic class, what does Matthew want versus Paul? End goal. He wants Jews, halakhic Shomer Shabbos Jews, believing in Jesus. And the virgin stuff didn't go well. Where did it go well with? The Gentiles. That's why Paul beats Matthew. And there's all this debate. Was Paul responding to Matthew? That's for another class. So, the question is, who is Emmanuel for Jews? And I had to look this up because one reading was, it's the son of King Ahaz, or the birth of Hezekiah, or it's Isaiah's son. So the rabbis really don't know who it is, but contemporary Jewish belief since Isaiah 7:14, it's not a young Jew from the Galilee. I can promise you that. It's probably more than likely the birth of Hezekiah, who is this. Anyone who comes from the Davidic line is, for the most part, a good king. Questions, comments, who is confused? Give me a look. Are you confused? Not you, Doug, a back row. Okay, tell me if I can help. Okay, so yeah, so Christians. Yes, those are not. So that is. I want to say that's a believe-in Bible. I don't. Versus if you went to grad school, you're not going to get the New Revised Standard Edition with adjudicated footnotes with Greek stuff. It's an academic Bible is going to honor the original Hebrew translation. The authors of those Bibles are interpreting Isaiah 7:14 as it appears in the Septuagint. So I'm not saying it's an iffy translation. I'm just saying the New Revised Standard Version, which is on that side, offers more of a accurate perception of the word. And I tell you, Pastor Long, they would all say the same thing. Because when they went to school, they were using the New Revised Standard Edition. That is the Oxford Study Bible. But again, I'm not destroying faith. When Martin Luther, what was that? Okay. But you should know that when we look at translations, even in Jewish communities, when you have Orthodox commentary versus a more academic commentary, when we talk about the book of Daniel, Daniel has these visions of 4 different empires, and the last empire in an Orthodox commentary, he says that this beast with all these different horns represents the Roman Empire. That Orthodox Bible is 100,000,000% categorically wrong. The 4th beast is not the Romans. The 4th beast is Antiochus IV, the menace in the Hanukkah story. He was a Greek. So, because the rabbis, well, it's personal, they really hate any association with things that are red. Red. Red, yes, red. I'm making a joke because I have red hair. Yes, because they trace it back to Esau, who in his redness, and I take it a little personally for me. Oh no. Red, like they don't like anything that's like a ginger, reddish, and the Romans have like a red flag. So when they describe Esau's, redness, I'm like, what's wrong with being, red? Okay, sorry, I thought that would be better. Okay, all right. So for the Jews, are they God's messenger? Yes, I really don't like this terminology because it's a weird way in which when I was just restudying biblical prophets, I'm like, I don't really think prophets are God's messengers. We have another word in Hebrew for messengers, and it's really more the God's messengers are more like angels. So I don't really like how they're God's messengers, because I can make an argument that all of humanity, or Jews in particular, we are all God's messengers, okay? So covenant, there was a typo, it should have been enforcer. Yes, their job was to get Judahites or Israelites, Hebrews, whatever you want to call them, back to their covenantal responsibility. So, the book... Yes. Yes. Different. Like Jeremiah, dictates a letter from God when they're on the road to Babel. It's a different relationship. But the book of Deuteronomy, you break it all apart the way we do. There's a series of homilies. There's a series of final sermons that Moses is giving to the people of Israel. And what are these homilies? Like this past week, we just read Parshat Nevi'im. So you're standing together. It's a Sinai moment. And I'm about to die Moses. Joshua's about to take over. And for you to be successful in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, what do you think you need to do, Israelites? Tell me. God and do the laws. Do, whatever. Look, when you see in the Torah all those laws, if you do this, don't do that. This is what you're not allowed to do. This is what you can do. Do it. And if you do all these laws, what will happen? Prosper. And if you don't do it, yeah, you may or may not prosper. Okay, but Moses dies, and there's this famous saying, never has there ever been a prophet like Moses. Okay, but Moses is doing exactly what the other prophets do. If you don't do Torah, bad things will happen. Now, I don't believe in this theology. We've evolved as society, thank God. But if you don't do this, because back then, if bad things happen, that's their only rationalization of why they missed the mark. So if you ask Jews, why was the Second Temple destroyed? They're not going to say, we decided to revolt against the Roman Empire. We thought that we were going to beat them. We were upset with blue-collar layoffs at the temple and mixed communities in Caesarea. No, we lost because we sinned. How could our God ever allow God's temple to be defeated? That's our only rationale for thinking. So, when I say covenant enforcer, that is their main responsibility, whether it's Moses or whether it's Isaiah or whether it's Micah, Ezekiel, Elijah, Elisha. Their main job is to make sure that they are focused on following the mitzvot, the commandments. A mitzvah does not mean good deeds. I mean, doing a mitzvah means you're fulfilling a biblical commandment or a rabbinic commandment that does bring goodness to the world. Shiloh's, questions so far? Okay, so another term for the rabbis is called chazal. Jews love acronyms. And they also see them as a form of justice. Now, sometimes I don't like the word justice because it has too many use today. So when you have like insert blank justice, it starts losing its meanings. I understand justice as what's right, what's wrong, through an adjudicated process of lawyers or judges. I'm kind of like a stickler for that. I have no way to fulfill justice as the prophets wanted us to do. I don't have that capability. I don't have that capability to demand justice. You have to go through a process. And in America, I interpret justice as courts, criminal or civil. That's why when you see a lot of political signs, insert word blank justice, it starts to dilute its meaning of justice. Because justice has to be a rigorous examination of all the facts, all the nuances, all the shades of gray, all of the ancillary information in order to make an adjudicated, informal decision. The Talmud teaches us that when a judge makes a decision, it is as though a sword hangs over his head to prevent a rush for judgment. And this is going to be paramount for biblical prophets. So when I see justice, this is not a societal call to demand new action. I think it just gets watered down in scripted couch scripture, meaning they pull something from scripture and they think a contemporary point. Justice for them is to make sure that whoever is leading the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, we're going to go that momentarily, that they are fulfilling and ensuring the Torahitic commandments to make sure Israel or the Judahites continue to be good mensches. Period. Questions, concerns, comments, anything so far? Here's what I know. When we get to like Jeremiah give the green light to King Zedekiah, puppet king, to go to war with the allied with the Egyptians to go after the Babylonians, you will lose, and you will lose because you don't have God's, like God's not allowing this war. Or maybe if you really think about it, Jeremiah was saying, you are an, can I say like idiot? Is that okay? Okay. You are an idiot king. You don't want to team up with the Egyptians because really the Egyptians really don't like you. And the reason we don't like you, we have this in primary sources, is because the way we describe the Egyptians with the Exodus, they really don't want to team up with you and they're not going to show up for you. And if you go against the Babylonians, you will lose. So why even entertain this idea of defeating? And he's like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And you're like, I told you so. I told you so. So, but then, you were good? Okay, I got a whole copyright, image and everything. Okay. When Saul does not engage in mass death of war, and then Samuel says, you screwed up, I don't see that as like, it's not justice to me. I still see it as my God is better than your God type of a biblical mindset. So justice is a I don't know, but I just associate the word justice through wise individuals who adjudicate through a rigorous examination of laws. Yes, but we also know, remember when Moses, after they crossed the sea and they're in wandering, he's like, oh my God, I got to hear every single court case. Nobody knows anything. I got to heal every single matter. And then his father-in-law is like, Wojciech, what's wrong with you? You got to find judges throughout the land. You got to divide and conquer. If you hear every single case, you won't give them justice because if you're all burnt out, you're a bad judge. So in a Jewish tradition, yes, God is judge, arbiter, and truth. And we're about to articulate this liturgy starting tomorrow night, and then on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, a brief period, and then once again the following week for Yom Kippur. Yes, a lot of judgment things. But God put judgmental responsibility also into humanity. And that is a very important point. Like the Sanhedrin, legal courts, to make sure that some type of living society is going. And so the judges are considered in the prophet section because they are supposed to get the people of Israel back on simply doing mitzvot. So for Jews, that is fundamental. I'm a prophet. I tell the leader, your main responsibility is to do Judaism. And within the tenets of Judaism, whatever it looks like then, there are areas devoted to ritual law, which a king would adjudicate those responsibilities to the priest. And then over here would be civil law. And that's where the king would make sure that there was order. And if any time something happened, a breakdown, the prophet's job was to make sure the king got back on the path to enforcing laws. It sounds simplistic. Each prophet has a different type of a theme. But that is the most important thing. We do not see them as fortune tellers or prophets. And there once was like a movie with Cyndi Lauper and Jeff Goldberg. You ever seen that movie? She's like closing her eyes by the pyramid and she's like predicting something. All right, in the 80s. It's not. We don't. It's not the way we do it, and it's an assumption that they're seekers into the future. I don't see them that way, and I think a lot of my colleagues would. Okay, remember how we talked about Elijah? You remember he would walk around with like a lumber on his back, okay? An odd duck. And so, actually, let me back up. Before that, Solomon, sorry, I have to make fun of Solomon. Solomon, the wise, then he made the northern tribes engage in like corvée labor. He made them work for free. And he really didn't like northerners. And he really liked Judah. And then they built the temple. And they're like, where's our payment? You took advantage of us. And he said, so what? He dies. We got the divided monarchy, okay? So what do you think happens in a divided monarchy? Okay, so we got a southern king, which is Judah. And what happens in the north? What? You have a northern king, okay? But before this, where was the center of Israelite worship? Worship, where before the split, where was the home of Jewish worship? The sacrifices, the priests, where? Jerusalem, yes. Where? Who knows where exactly? Nimset, where in Jerusalem? Where all the sacrifices happen? The temple. Everything happened there. That was the center of worship. So when you had to go on your pilgrimage festivals, you went to Jerusalem. Okay, now that there's a divided monarchy, I'm going to make a joke that my New Yorkers will understand. If you ask anyone, if you say you're from Westchester, if you say you're from New York, someone from the city would say, you're not from New York, you're from where? Upstate, right, Doug? Okay. It's this, you start having tension. So when Jews were in the Lower East Side, then they started moving, and they went, actually there's Jews in Staten Island, then they went to Long Island, then there's Jews in Riverdale. When they want to sound tough, they say they're from the Bronx, okay, but they're from Riverdale. That's totally different. Okay, and then they keep on going. So New York was once the center for Jewish life, like Brooklyn, and now it's moving, it moves. And so what do you think happens in the north? New worship centers happen. So there are other places they did sacrifices, which if you learn, like you're only supposed to sacrifice like in Jerusalem, in the temple. Now they were doing that in the north. So you had the rise of kings, and therefore, once we had a divided monarchy, we kings needed what? They need money. They're going to get some priests, and what else do they need? Warriors, yeah, they have lousy militaries. They need prophets. They need prophets the most. And it's the prophet's job is to figure out how to maintain some type of, the word Jewish really doesn't emerge until after the Babylonian return with Cyrus the Great. This one is how to maintain a Hebrewish religion while they're removed from the center of Jewish life. I'm trying to come up with a really good example. Oh, they were pretty believable, but remember, it's when everything's new. Like when I moved here, when I moved here, I said, "Who's your team?" I really didn't understand what that meant. Like, who's my team? I was utterly blown away. Like, who's your team? I was utterly blown away when I started driving here. I said, why is there like Ole Miss, Georgia? Why are all these states? I'm like, but I was so confused. So you come down here. So okay, but what happens if you're from Tuscaloosa or Auburn? Sorry, I know you guys got robbed. Okay. And you move to, like, of all places, like San Francisco. They're not going to ask you, who's your team? What you're going to end up doing is, you're going to have to Google where's the University of Alabama, like bar or something where you can go and watch the game. So when we lived in San Diego, there was a restaurant that was the Ohio State. I'm from Michigan. Okay, they were always there. Okay, on game day, but you have to bring it with you. So I didn't bring anything to the South. I said Detroit Red Wings and Lions and Michigan football it's different in Michigan. So you have to bring your religion with you. And so once there's a divided kingdom, I like to say we have a divided prophecy. Okay? So hold on real quick. So in a Jewish perspective, we have the major prophets and we have the minor prophets. What do you guys think why we call them major versus minor? First year rabbinical students don't know this. Funny. Why do they get the title of major versus minor? You're so good. Why can't I just bring you? Okay. It's a bigger book. That's it. It's just more of it, okay? Versus 7 pages versus a lot of, you may, gold star for you. It's not their level of importance, okay? But these are the main ones. And yes, in Jewish worship today, we quote a lot from Ezekiel and Isaiah. There's certain prayers. We like these prayers. And Isaiah is rich of prophecies and visions. And so, yes, if we were to break down, we would see themes of returning back to that signing moment of the covenant. Okay, we were once exiled, and if we do good things, especially in the Jeremiah, would write to the exiled via God. God wrote a letter to Jeremiah, or dictated, and Jeremiah sent the letter to the exiled priests, aristocracy, and intelligentsia living in Babel, saying, God is with you regardless of the temple being destroyed, and one day you shall return back to Eretz Yisrael. So early forms of biblical Zionism. Okay? So these guys have a lot of, I want to say, apocalyptic. It's not like end times. It just means uncovering things that may happen. Yes, they're not really, they're in a weird category to me. And then we get to messianic hope. Everyone's like, what do we talk about now? Okay. Daniel, and who has a New Revised Standard Version? Where's he found? Well, it doesn't matter where, but where's it located? If you were, it's, yeah. Near the my. Okay. I'll answer for you. Daniel is not in the writing section. He's in the prophet section, and I'm going to show you a chart momentarily. Okay. So Daniel is a hybrid of Aramaic and Hebrew. The prophet or writer Daniel, we'll go from the New Revised Standard Edition, is a prophet writing in Babylonia. He's in the king's court. He dreams a lot, and he has visions of empires coming and going, but in reality, he's writing against the Greeks in Israel. But through dating, there's a difference of opinion. Okay? And then we get the minor prophets. It was just at the symphony yesterday. Major, minor. Okay. Okay. All these guys are considered the minor. And why are they considered the minor? They're really little. Okay. Yes. They're short. And I got to tell a really funny joke. I think it's funny. So, when we study, when we chant Torah on Shabbat, we chant the Torah portion, then we chant the accompanying Haftorah portion, which is the prophets. The reason why we did that is because back in the day, they banned reading Torah, so we found a way to chant from the prophets themes of the Torah. Dr. Solomon, how often do we give drashot on the prophets? Come on. Bingo. So a professor of mine says, Reformed Jews claim to be the the modern prophetic people, a call to action and justice. But we never study the prophets. So it's really like the greatest, I don't know if it's ironic or a paradox, but all these, like the minor prophets, well, we do Jonah because Yom Kippur, he was just, I'm going to break it down even more, but we really don't study them. So it's like, not only is it divided prophecy back then, it's still a divided prophecy today, because many Jews amongst the Reform movement, it's like, not even like Cantor sometimes, he'll introduce the Haftorah portion, and every single time when he introduces the Haftorah portion for Bar Bat Mitzvah, he's like, this Haftorah speaks to God's love and reminder to get back of the ways of Torah. It's much the same thing. Okay? But we don't. Why? I don't know. Okay. So, all right. With the minor prophets, it's still the take-home point. Be a good person. Okay? We got to take care of those who are vulnerable in society. Now, I don't want to say, remember, governance then is not governance today. I don't want to say because the biblical prophets say we take care of the poor, this is what a lot of Reform rabbis do, that I'm making a call saying that government entities have responsibility. No, I think humanity has a responsibility. That's another class, okay? And above all, and I capitalize this, the number one sin, the biggest no-no, if you engage in idolatry, this is what is going to bring on not the blessings, but the curses. I can't stress it enough. In Torah study day, they go, yes, it's idolatry. When you look at rabbinical commentary of Torah portions, the fear of idolatry is so real. Why do you think it is for them? I mean, we're not talking like murder and, all the bad things, but idolatry, and I made it bigger font for you, be more scary. Okay, wrath of God, but what is it about idolatry that just, it's like one time I brought up that game where the Auburn player ran it back from the end zone, remember? Okay, and an Alabama fan got mad. Or one time I was in Cleveland, I said, hey, how about Art Modell? And the Cleveland people got mad, he sold the team. Okay, but why they get really mad? Why do you think? What was that? Okay, I'm the Lord your God, and you shall not have other gods before. Okay, so that is a real. What do we know in the book of Exodus? What happens? We're paying the price for it momentarily. What happens in the book of Exodus? Okay, wander, idolatry, but there's a little golden calf. Okay, and then Moses and then it makes a deal with God. He's so upset. The golden calf, we're still paying the price for it, okay? We're not supposed to be responsible for the sins of our parents and grandparents, but smashes it, then he makes a deal with God, let him live, and then the Levites come and kill thousands of and then Aaron, what a scene. That scene, we're still paying the price for it. Because what does idolatry do? Idolatry. What does it do? Especially for the Israelites. And what does that corruption do? There you go. Okay. Who remembers what does kosher mean? Anyone remember? Fit for usage. Proper. It's not holy or impure, pure, it's fine. It just means, so, the reason why kashrut laws, whether it's food or tefillin, or I showed my father the mezuzah that we have from Temple Emmanuel, that it's a kosher scroll. Because if it's not fit, what does that mean? It's not valid. So you have pasul Torahs, invalid Torahs, meaning Torahs that are not to be read from the Torah because there are blemishes in them, because it causes some type of spiritual impurity. And for food laws, if we go down the sort of idolatry, then if we're eating Wilbur or having shrimp or whatever, we keep diluting the corpus of Jewish life. So idolatry, yes, we can say it's the worship of other gods, but think about the crises that Jews had when the Greeks came in, and you had all the Greek gods, and then you had live the Apollo with the Roman gods. This was a substantial concern for generations of leaving the corpus of Judaism, which is Hear, O Israel, Adonai is one, Adonai is our God, okay? A prayer we say when we wake up, a prayer you say when you wrap the tefillin, a prayer you say before you go to bed, okay? The oneness of God is an absolute. And for these divided prophets, their job is to make sure that wherever Jews are, whether in the north or wherever in the south, remember, this is the Jewish perspective, and next week we're going to get to the Christian perspective. Because Christian New Testament writers are going to have to wrestle with the notion of something novel. And any time there's something novel, when you guys get a new pastor or a new rabbi, anytime there's change, can lead down to a road of inherent uncertainty that we do not like. On that note, have a good class. Go to church, and see you next Sunday. Thank you, guys. Oh, any final questions? People leaving. Yes. Minor ones faces threats, and we're going to get into. I'm going to break it down next week. Okay. Okay. Thanks, guys.